My name is Owen Carter. I'm 31 years old, a graphic designer and sculptor living in Boulder, Colorado. I've always been the quiet type, observant, methodical, someone who acts with precision rather than impulse. I don't believe in dramatic confrontations or emotional outbursts. I believe in timing, and when the time is right, I act. For almost 3 years, I was in a relationship with Tessa Monroe. She was a holistic therapist with intense ideas about spirituality, freedom, and what she called transformative experiences. We had our differences, sure, but I respected her space. I thought she respected mine, too. I was wrong. 1 month before our anniversary in early March 2025, Tessa sat me down and made an announcement. She didn't ask, she didn't discuss. She announced. She was going on a 2-week self-discovery retreat. The catch? She'd be going with her ex-boyfriend. Someone who, according to her, understood her on another level. I didn't react. I just nodded. In that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. I'd been disregarded, dismissed, and any confrontation would only put me in the role she expected, the jealous, reactive boyfriend. But I had no intention of reacting. I had every intention of rewriting the entire script. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. Tessa justified everything with vague spiritual terms. Personal journeys, non-possessiveness, transcending the couple structure. She said it was temporary, that she'd come back renewed. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't be there when she got back. I'd noticed the warning signs for months, the evasive conversations, the excessive admiration for open relationships, the subtle disdain for anything resembling routine or structure. Tessa referred to practical life as limiting. I just observed, silently, but registering every sign. The day she left for her retreat, I started organizing. I rented a loft in Denver, took time off work, and spent the following days methodically dismantling my life from the apartment we shared. I took only what was mine: furniture, tools, projects, unfinished sculptures. Everything that belonged to her I carefully packed, labeled, and left in one corner of the living room. I left the apartment key on the table, and on top of that key, I left a note. I don't owe you an explanation. You know exactly why. Then I left, and I didn't look back. Moving to Denver wasn't just about distance. It was about recalibration. I reorganized everything. I turned my new apartment into a studio and got back into sculpture, something I'd neglected during our relationship. I never publicly mentioned the reason for my move. The silence was intentional, not out of pride, but strategy. I knew what would happen next, and I wasn't wrong. When Tessa returned from her retreat in late March and found the empty apartment, she reacted exactly as I'd anticipated. She tried to flip the narrative. She posted vague messages on Instagram about abusive relationships. She launched an improvised line of energy healing necklaces and presented herself as a woman, reborn from the ashes. But her story didn't hold weight. People who knew her recognized the manipulative pattern, and those who didn't soon noticed the inconsistencies. The comments started appearing. Questions, doubts. Her Instagram following, which she'd cultivated carefully over the years, began to crack. Former clients started sharing their own experiences. Stories of overcharged sessions, undelivered promises, spiritual bypassing dressed up as therapy. I never said a word. I didn't need to. A few months later, in June 2025, Tessa did something I should have seen coming but still found audacious. She tried to sue me for domestic partnership, claiming we had a stable conjugal life and that she deserved compensation. She wanted half of everything I'd built, including the value of my new studio space and ongoing sculpture projects. My attorney presented the facts: rental agreements in my name only, separate bank accounts, no formal record of dependency, no shared assets, no joint anything. The judge dismissed the case in less than 20 minutes. I sat in that courtroom and watched her attorney scramble for arguments that didn't exist. Tessa looked at me once, hoping for some reaction. I gave her nothing. Just the same calm I'd maintained since the day she announced her self-discovery trip. Outside the courthouse, she tried to approach me. I kept walking. The lawsuit failure marked a turning point. Not for me. I was already moving forward. But for Tessa. Her public image, which she'd built so carefully around crystals, sage bundles, and Instagram-worthy affirmations, started to crumble in real time. The energy-healing necklace business she'd launched, it became a running joke in local wellness circles. People started calling them breakup beads. One customer posted a review saying the only thing the necklace healed was her bank account, by forcing her to be more careful with money. The post went semi-viral in Boulder. Tessa tried to respond with her usual spiritual deflection, something about not everyone being ready for this level of healing, but it only made things worse. Event organizers who used to book her for wellness retreats and moon circles quietly stopped calling. Her name disappeared from lineups. When she reached out asking why, she got polite non-answers. "We're going in a different direction." The budget shifted. "We'll keep you in mind for future events." Nobody wanted to say it directly, but everyone knew she'd become toxic to associate with. Meanwhile, my life in Denver was finding its rhythm. My new loft had floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light, perfect for sculpting. I'd converted half of it into a working studio with my tools organized on industrial shelving I'd picked up from a metal workshop in Rhino. The other half was living space, minimal and clean. I started accepting commissions again. Small at first, a corporate lobby piece for a tech startup, a memorial sculpture for a family in Littleton. Then, bigger projects. A gallery in the Denver Art District reached out after seeing photos of my work online. They wanted 3 pieces for an upcoming show focused on transformation and personal evolution. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my evenings working with clay and stone, letting the material guide the form. Sculpture had always been meditative for me, a way to process without words. Each piece became a marker of distance from who I'd been when I was with Tessa. Someone who'd made himself smaller to accommodate her chaos. I also started teaching. A community arts center in 5 Points asked if I'd run weekend workshops for young artists. I said yes. Teaching forced me to articulate what I'd always done instinctively. It was grounding. The students ranged from teenagers to people in their 40s looking for creative outlets. They asked direct questions. They wanted to learn. There was no performance, no spiritual posturing, just craft. One student, a guy named Marcus in his early 20s, reminded me of myself at that age. Quiet, focused, absorbing everything. After the 3rd workshop, he stayed behind to ask about technique. We ended up talking for an hour about negative space, about what you don't sculpt being as important as what you do. Sometimes, I told him, the best move is the one you don't make. He nodded like he understood more than just sculpture. Back in Boulder, Tessa's situation continued to deteriorate. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances, people who'd remained friendly with both of us but clearly saw through her act. One friend, a yoga instructor named Sienna, texted me out of the blue. "Just want you to know," she wrote. "A lot of us always knew something was off with Tessa. The way she talked about you when you weren't around. Always made everything about her journey, her growth. Never acknowledged what you brought to the relationship. Anyway, you dodged a bullet. Hope Denver's treating you well." I appreciated the message, but I didn't need validation. I already knew. Tessa apparently didn't handle the social exile well. She started posting more frequently on Instagram, long, rambling captions about narcissistic abuse, gaslighting, emotional abandonment. She never named me, but the subtext was obvious. She was trying to position herself as the victim of a cold, unfeeling partner who'd vanished without warning. The problem was people knew the actual story, or enough of it. Someone, I never found out who, commented on one of her posts. "Didn't you leave him to go on a trip with your ex?" Kind of weird to play the victim here. The comment got 43 likes before Tessa deleted it, but screenshots circulated. The narrative she was trying to build kept collapsing under the weight of basic facts. She tried to pivot again. This time, she rebranded as a relationship trauma coach, offering one-on-one sessions to help people recover from emotionally unavailable partners. The price was $150 per session. As far as I know, she got maybe 2 clients. I never responded to any of it. Not the posts, not the subtweets, not the thinly veiled stories about men who abandon women in their healing journey. Silence, I'd learned, was the most powerful response. It left her swinging at air. My attorney advised me to document everything, just in case she tried another legal maneuver. I kept a folder with screenshots, but I never felt the need to use them. Tessa's own behavior was her worst enemy. By late summer 2025, I was getting invitations to exhibit in group shows across Colorado. One gallery in Colorado Springs wanted a solo installation. Another in Fort Collins asked if I'd be interested in a residency program. My work was gaining traction, not because I was chasing attention, but because I was focused. I attended an opening reception for the Denver Art District show in early September. The gallery was packed, collectors, other artists, people who just appreciated the work. My pieces were displayed in the main room. 3 abstract figures in bronze and stone, each one exploring the concept of shedding weight. A woman in her 50s approached me near the end of the night. She introduced herself as a curator from a museum in Santa Fe. She asked about my process, my influences, what I was working on next. "I'm interested in transitions," I told her. "What it means to leave something behind and not look back." She studied the sculptures for a long moment. "These feel honest," she said. "Like they're not trying to convince anyone of anything. They just exist." "That's the idea," I replied. She handed me her card. "Let's stay in touch. I think your work could fit well in a show we're planning for next spring." I thanked her and slipped the card into my pocket. It was the kind of opportunity I would have talked about endlessly with Tessa, seeking her validation, her excitement, but she would have found a way to make it about herself, about how my success was really a reflection of the growth she'd inspired in me. Now, standing in that gallery, I realized I didn't need to share it with anyone. The achievement was enough on its own. Driving back to my loft that night, I thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. I'd gone from sharing space with someone who drained my energy to building a life entirely on my own terms. The difference was tangible. I slept better, I worked better, I existed better. Tessa had thought leaving me would be her moment of liberation. What she didn't realize was that she'd given me mine. As fall settled into Colorado, I'd established a routine that felt sustainable. Mornings were for client work, graphic design projects that paid the bills and kept my technical skills sharp. My hourly rate was $95, and I was selective about the projects I took on. Afternoons and evenings were for sculpture, weekends were for teaching. The Santa Fe curator followed through. She emailed in late September with details about a potential spring exhibition. The theme would be resilience and reinvention, and she was interested in 4 pieces from me. The timeline would be tight, everything would need to be ready by March, but I welcomed the possibility. It gave me something to work toward. I started sketching concepts immediately. I wanted the pieces to tell a story without being literal. No broken hearts, no obvious symbolism. Just forms that suggested movement, separation, reconstruction. I worked in my studio late into the night, the city lights of Denver visible through the windows. Around this time, I reconnected with an old friend from college. Daniel had moved to Boulder years ago and worked as a software engineer for a startup. We'd lost touch during my relationship with Tessa. She'd never liked him, said he had closed-off energy, which I now understood meant he saw through her act. Daniel and I met for coffee at a place in Lodo. He'd heard about the breakup through mutual friends but hadn't reached out, assuming I needed space. When I told him the full story, the retreat with the ex, the silent move, the lawsuit, he laughed so hard he almost spilled his espresso. "That's the most Owen thing I've ever heard," he said. "No drama, no big confrontation, you just left." "Pretty much," I said. "And she tried to sue you?" "She did. Didn't work out for her." Daniel shook his head. "I never understood what you saw in her. She always struck me as someone who needed constant validation, like exhaustingly so." He wasn't wrong. Looking back, I could see how much energy I'd spent managing Tessa's emotions, affirming her choices, supporting her endless projects that never materialized into anything concrete. The necklace business was just the latest in a long line of half-baked ideas she'd launched with great fanfare and abandoned when they required actual work. "You seem different," Daniel observed. "More grounded." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm finally doing things for myself instead of accommodating someone else's chaos." We made plans to meet up regularly. It felt good to rebuild friendships I'd let slide. Meanwhile, Tessa's online presence became increasingly erratic. She started posting about spiritual warfare and energetic attacks from people who couldn't handle her truth. She claimed she was being targeted by a smear campaign orchestrated by bitter exes and jealous competitors. The problem with that narrative was obvious to anyone paying attention. She didn't have competitors. She wasn't successful enough to threaten anyone, and the only ex making moves was me. In complete silence, one of her posts particularly stood out. She'd written a long caption about how society punishes women who choose unconventional paths, who refuse to be confined by patriarchal relationship structures. She positioned her self-discovery retreat as an act of radical feminism, a rejection of possessive masculinity. The comments were brutal. "Girl, you went on vacation with your ex and got mad when your boyfriend moved out. That's not feminism, that's consequences," one person wrote. "Radical feminism is not using spiritual language to justify treating people poorly," another added. Tessa deleted the post within hours, but the damage was done. Her remaining followers, down from nearly 3,000 to just over 700, were losing patience with the constant victim narrative. I heard through Sienna that Tessa had been asked to leave a wellness collective she'd been part of for 2 years. Apparently, she'd been using the shared space to store inventory for her necklace business without permission, and had gotten into heated arguments with other members about negative energy and lack of support for women entrepreneurs. The collective had a meeting and voted her out. She posted about it, of course, framing it as betrayal by people she'd considered family. But Sienna told me the real story. Tessa had been warned multiple times about her behavior and refused to adjust. The vote wasn't even close. By October 2025, I was deep into preliminary work for the potential Santa Fe show. I was developing 4 concepts, abstract figures in varying stages of emergence. The first would be mostly encased in raw stone. The second would show partial emergence, the figure breaking free but still connected to the base. The third would be almost fully formed, standing but looking back. The fourth would be completely free, facing forward, no connection to its origin point. I didn't plan it consciously, but the progression mirrored my own journey. From being trapped in a relationship that didn't serve me, to recognizing the problem, to taking action, to finally moving forward unburdened. My workshop students noticed the evolution in my approach. One of them, a woman named Adriana who worked as a nurse, asked me during a break what inspired the new direction. "Personal experience," I said. "Sometimes you have to leave things behind to become who you're supposed to be." She nodded thoughtfully. "I'm going through a divorce right now. This really resonates." We talked for a while about her situation. Her husband had been emotionally absent for years, and she'd finally had enough. She was scared, but also relieved. I told her what I'd learned, that the fear of change is often worse than the change itself. "Once you're on the other side," I said, "you'll wonder why you didn't do it sooner." Around the same time, I got an unexpected message. It was from Tessa's mother, Patricia. We'd met several times during the relationship. Holiday dinners in 2022 and 2023, a birthday celebration in 2024. She'd always been kind to me, if a bit enabling of Tessa's behavior. The message was brief. "Owen, I want you to know that I'm sorry for how things ended. Tessa told me her version of events, but I've heard other perspectives since then. I realize now that she wasn't honest with me, or with herself. I hope you're doing well. You always seemed like a good person." I appreciated the message, even though it didn't change anything. I wrote back thanking her and letting her know I was doing fine. I didn't elaborate on Tessa's behavior or try to convince Patricia of anything. It wasn't my job to manage their family dynamics. But the message confirmed something I'd suspected. Even the people closest to Tessa were starting to see through the performance. The workshops at the Community Arts Center had grown significantly. What started as weekend sessions expanded to include weekday evening classes. I hired an assistant, a recent art school graduate named Keisha, who had a gift for teaching beginners. We made a good team. She handled the technical fundamentals while I focused on helping students find their creative voice. Marcus, the quiet student who'd reminded me of my younger self, had developed remarkably. He'd started selling small pieces at local craft markets and was researching sculpture programs for potential graduate school applications. He asked me to write a recommendation letter when the time came, and I was honored to agree. "You gave me permission to take my work seriously," he told me after one of our sessions. "You did that yourself," I said. "I just showed you it was possible." My graphic design work was thriving too. I'd taken on a branding project for a sustainable food startup, and the owner was so pleased with the results that he referred me to 3 other companies. For the first time in my adult life, I was turning down work because I didn't have the capacity, not because I wasn't getting offers. I also reconnected with more old friends, people I'd lost touch with during the relationship. It became clear how much I'd isolated myself, how much of my social life had revolved around Tessa's preferences and comfort zones. Now, freed from that, I was rebuilding connections that felt genuine and reciprocal. Daniel and I went hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park one weekend in late October. It was one of those perfect Colorado days. Clear sky, aspens showing their fall colors, crisp air that made you feel awake in your bones. We stopped at an overlook and sat on the rocks, looking out at the mountains. "You know what I respect about how you handled everything," Daniel said. "You didn't try to win, you just left the game." I thought about that. He was right. There was no scoreboard, no final confrontation, no dramatic moment where I proved Tessa wrong. I'd just quietly built a life that didn't include her. "Sometimes the best move is the one that doesn't look like a move at all," I said. We sat in silence for a while, watching hawks circle in the distance. I don't know what happened to Tessa after the Wellness Collective incident. I heard rumors she was planning to move to Portland, trying another fresh start. Maybe it would work out for her. Maybe she'd learn something. Maybe she wouldn't. It wasn't my concern anymore. What I learned was this: you don't owe anyone access to your life. Not an explanation, not a confrontation, not a chance to explain themselves. When someone shows you who they are, through their choices, their priorities, their willingness to disregard you, you're allowed to believe them the first time, and you're allowed to walk away. The revenge, if you can call it that, wasn't in what I took from Tessa. It was in what I gave myself. Permission to prioritize my own peace. Permission to build something meaningful without seeking approval. Permission to exist fully, without shrinking to accommodate someone else's chaos. 7 months after leaving that note on the table, I'm exactly where I need to be. Not because I defeated anyone or proved a point, but because I chose myself. Consistently, quietly, without apology. The Santa Fe show might happen. The career opportunities might continue to grow. New relationships might develop. But none of that determines my worth or my peace. I've already won the only battle that mattered, the one for my own life. And that, I've realized, is the only victory that ever really matters. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.